let's get into some business here. Yesterday, you had a lunch meeting at the governor's mansion in Raleigh, and you had all the players at the table, including Senate President Phil Berger and Speaker of the House Tom Tillis. And it looks like maybe some progress on this impasse with regard to how much school teacher raises are going to be given. Of course, the Senate wants 11%. The House and you have said you would agree to 6%. Their new proposal now is so you said 6% at most.
Yeah, the only exception, we're coming up with a unique idea that has been Tillis. Tom announced it at the meeting, and I brought it up at the dinner along with Tom, and that is the concept of having a 5 to 6% pay raise, but then allowing the superintendents to decide whether or not they want to use teacher assistant money for further raises or use it to keep the thousands of teacher assistants that are very important in many schools. Instead of making that decision, Raleigh, why don't we let the superintendents make those decisions?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a governor who wants to give as much flexibility to local governments as possible. That's the Republican and conservative way. And frankly, I think us Republicans get confused too, just like the Democrats do in Raleigh, about trying to have central control. It's a big state, just like I'm going Northampton right now, Elizabeth City in that area. And, their needs are completely different from Asheville or Greensboro or Greenville. Why make all the rules consistent out of Raleigh when each area has their own unique needs? I think that's the answer.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good compromise, it seems to me. I know Becky Gray from the John Locke Foundation was on yesterday. I think John Hood actually wrote about that earlier this week. So that seems like a pretty good idea to me. Now we had Jennifer Little, who is a Pitt County school board member, in here this morning, and we asked her opinion of that. One of the concerns there would be that if one school system in one county agrees to give a higher raise to school teachers, and the other county wanted to maintain their teaching assistants, you may have some recruiting across county lines, but I guess that's always possible anyway.
You know what? That's the decision they get to make.
Yeah.
So they want us to make that decision for them in Raleigh instead of them making that decision closest to home. Those are the tough decisions, teacher assistants or even more pay. But if we're expecting in the future to have a consistent pay plan across the state, I think that's foolish because we have different needs within different areas of the state for different types of teachers. So, yeah, they're going to have to put their thinking cap on and think about, prioritizing. And, yes, some areas might need to pay more because it's more difficult to recruit teachers.
The impasse has been there's been some progress made on Medicaid, but then there's got to be
not really. We
thought there was.
Nah, we're still having some issues there. I think the solution I brought up is the best issue, but the cuts that were presented by the Senate yesterday, they reduced the cuts by about 50% or so. But I cannot accept cutting group homes, people in group homes that could have Alzheimer's, other disabilities, and releasing them out on the street. That's just it's over 5,000 people that get this money in group homes.
Yeah, there's
I know this the people in group homes very well, being a former mayor, and I don't think mayors or cities would want that to happen.
The question mark now is really those kinds of decisions about Medicaid, because there was some agreement made early on. I know the HHS conference committee now, they're in conference. They're trying to come to some agreement.
On Medicaid reform, I think we are making some progress. I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about. We've got two different issues: Medicaid cuts,
yes,
which is part of the budget proposal by the Senate, and then Medicaid reform. I give Aldana Voss some credit. Her proposal is starting to get some legs. She doesn't get any credit for it. In fact, all she does is get criticism. But this is her proposal.
Yeah,
and it's starting to get some legs. And if they can strengthen it, that's fine with me. But it's amazing how the editorials about Dr. Voss continue when this is her plan. But we think Medicaid reform is needed, and I'm glad to see some progress. And I think Nelson Dollar is doing a good job in that area.
Governor Pat McCrory on the phone with us this morning. if the again, we see a little give and take on both sides now from the House and the Senate with regard to trying to get a budget agreement, but you're on record saying that if this thing doesn't come out the way that you need it, that you think it should, that you are willing to veto a budget that comes to your desk. And of course, that's strong language. What are your thoughts about that today? Do you see enough progress now that you think it's time for everybody to talk a little bit softer at each other, or are you still taking a pretty hard line stance on a veto?
We're talking, but I always have that in my back pocket. And, if I have to make a decision between releasing or having 5,200 people walk out of group homes within a couple of weeks, I don't want to have to be faced with that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with firing several thousand teachers' assistants within the next 2 weeks who would get pink slips.
Yeah.
I hope I don't have to make that choice. And that's why I think this other solution is best. And I think we're going to make progress. I hope we do, and I hope I don't have to make that decision. But that's why I make the big bucks. And then I can spend more time on, deciding such things as poet laureate, the things that the Raleigh News Observer puts on their front page. Important things like that. Flowers, roses are red. Can you believe that?
I saw you got criticized yesterday for who you picked as the state poet laureate.
I think I have exposed some elitism in that community of a closed society where we appoint a wonderful young lady who's written 2 books, but I guess she's not in the group of poets that are acceptable by the Raleigh News Observer editorial board and others in that community.
Well, the argument is that you did
the elitism is just amazing.
The argument was that you did not include North Carolina poets in your decision-making process there. How do you respond to them on that?
They're correct. I was given a group of names, and I made the decision. I didn't know there were no written rules or laws saying who I have to call before I make certain decisions. We were not aware of that norm in North Carolina government. Had I known, I would have done it. I didn't realize how sensitive the Raleigh News Observer is about this. Isn't there a little bit of elitism here? It sounds like a really closed society. Only approved. It sounds like almost like the old Soviet Union. There are approved poets and there are unapproved poets.
Back to the budget. Last question on the budget. When do you think we're going to get a deal? Are you optimistic that something will happen in the next week?
I hope so. I really do. And again, we're having good dialogue, and we had a good dialogue over lunch. I think we've got to quit doing press releases and announcing new deals and just come together. And I think the concept introduced by myself and Tom and others is the way to get out of this mess without cutting teachers' assistants or reserves or $25 million of maintenance money, which would decimate our government buildings and university buildings, by the way, which was not in the newspaper. Those are the things. I've got to operate state government after all the legislators go home. And I've got to make sure that we have sufficient funds for both short-term and long-term.
I can't not have you on and not thank you again for your support of the ECU School of Medicine. I know that as the budget continues, there's still going to be some discussion about some of the funding issues for the med schools in North Carolina, and you've been very supportive of that down the line, and we appreciate that, and we hope that you'll continue to help push that through this budget.
We will, and that School of Medicine is so important, especially for Eastern North Carolina, because we've got to get more doctors, especially in the rural area, and also your telemedicine is exactly what the doctor orders, to reach out to especially the rural areas that are having a tough time, not only with hospitals, but frankly with doctors. And ECU plays an important role in that. But at the same time, I need maintenance money just to keep the buildings up. And sadly, one of the budgets says reduces it from $50 million to $25 million. So those are the things you don't read about in the newspaper that I actually look at the details. And that's why I need to look for a reasonable conclusion as the chief executive officer of the state of North Carolina.
Let's change subjects for a minute. If you're driving and got
You want
another...
to talk about poets again, or what?
No. I want to talk about your trip to Nashville last weekend, the National Republican Governors Association meeting, and what came out of that was a video with you that I actually saw last night for the first time. I thought it was the best video I've ever seen of you, and you were excellent. But in it, it talks about your feelings about what's happening in North Carolina and how it relates to America and the U.S. and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, Fox News has you on, and what's his name? Stuart Varney interviews you and asks you if you are considering running for president. And so now this video comes out, so I have to ask you, Governor McCrory, are people at the Republican Governors Association talking to you about 2016 in some way?
No, but I am proud that I was nominated and named to one of 8 or 9 members to the National Governors Association Board of Directors. Myself and Scott Walker and the Idaho governor and several others, and I'm looking forward to participating in that. And that does give me access to federal officials in the White House as we fight for North Carolina, and that's my goal right now. So I'm trying to survive the next week, Henry. And Henry, did you see the video of me and Joe Biden?
Yes. What was that all about?
You were experience of my political life.
Here's the thing. I mean, you're sitting there. He said you had your arms crossed and weren't smiling at him. And I was thinking, how insecure do you have to be?
Well, he was in the second hour of a speech, and I was at the head table looking at everyone else fall asleep. And and then all of a sudden he interrupts his speech and says, "Why aren't you damn smiling at me?" And I'm like, I'm in shock. And the governor of Colorado is next to me, the governor of Tennessee's and I'm like going, and then he starts walking toward me, and I don't know what to do, Henry, so I stand up and hug him.
It was one of those awkward moments.
Right back to his speech for another 20, 30 minutes or whatever it was. I don't know.
It was an awkward moment, I have to admit. Yeah, you and Joe Biden with a bro hug. I don't know.
I did a bro hug, little man hug on Joe Biden. And then I sat down and I just looked at the other governors and I said, "What was that all about?" To myself, it was.
Yeah, well, it was about.
Afterwards, the vice president said, "Thanks for being a good sport," and I had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah, he again, it was he wants everybody to love him, and he couldn't believe that you weren't smiling at him.
Well, he wasn't like Seinfeld cracking jokes up there. I mean, it wasn't a real humorous hour-long speech, but.
Well, listen,
I was very respectful, and I always will be respectful to the president, vice president, the elected official. And it was fun. You could see it on the video. I think it's somewhere up there on YouTube.
Governor, it's great to have you. Great to have you on. Great to have you back in Eastern North Carolina today for the folks up in Northeastern.
Henry, I knew you'd be jealous about that man hug I gave Biden.
Yeah,
You're
I was.
used to getting that on stage. So.
At least it wasn't Obama, okay? All right, Governor, nice talking to you, and have a safe trip today, and good luck with the budget negotiations.